In the grand throne hall of the King of the United Nations and ruler of the first continent, Reinhard von Euclid addressed his only grandson. He told him the truth. He had seen the future, a future where Cain would become a villain so powerful, so utterly destructive, that the first, second, third, and even fourth continents would fall beneath his wrath. Not just fall, implode, crumble, and possibly get turned into a parking lot for demon goats. And in this future, Reinhard had tried countless times to end Cain's life before it could begin. But every attempt ended the same. Fate laughed. The timeline corrected itself like a stubborn GPS after watching his grandson destroy entire cities in visions he couldn't prevent. Reinhard finally gave up. Because when destiny won every round, what else could you do but raise the next big bad with love and discipline? On the day of Cain's birth, Reinhard had felt a flicker of hope. And in that moment, he chose not to kill him. Instead, he decided to make him so strong, so unstoppable, that even fate would think twice before messing with him. So, he called his grandson forward. "Cain von Euclid," he declared, "if I cannot change your fate, then I will forge you into something greater than fate itself." And thus began the 13-year journey of training, trauma, and questionable moral lessons. Fast forward to the fourth continent. A land governed by strength. In the city streets, a criminal had taken a woman hostage. He demanded freedom in exchange for her life. She screamed. She wept. She begged for help. "I'm a mother," she cried dramatically. "My child took his first steps yesterday." One female guard whispered, "We can't just stand here and watch this happen." Another replied pragmatically, "We also can't save her unless he lets go." The captain shouted at the criminal, "How dare you take a woman hostage like this? Do you even call yourself a warrior?" The criminal smirked. "Words don't change reality. Her life is the price." Just then, a mysterious figure appeared. Kuragami Makuro, better known as the Black Wolf Demon, looked at the stranger and blinked. "Do I know you?" The stranger replied coldly. "Are you truly him?" Makuro narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" Before he could finish, the stranger moved, with terrifying speed. He sliced off Makuro's head, then, without hesitation, he did the same to the woman. Silence fell over the scene. The guards stared. The captain yelled, "Why did you kill the hostage too?" "We were trying to rescue her." Before he could ask another question, or maybe scream again, the stranger dashed forward and killed one of the guards. The captain charged in rage, sword raised. The stranger didn't even flinch. He stood still, didn't turn, didn't dodge, and blocked the attack effortlessly. It was then that the captain realized he'd acted recklessly, driven by grief, not strategy. The female guard saw her captain's position was vulnerable and rushed to protect him. As her blade neared the stranger's neck, he finally spoke. "She wasn't innocent." The guard froze. "What?" she asked, confused. "The hostage," he said coldly. "She was an accomplice. So was the guard you just lost." The captain scoffed. "Impossible." The stranger shrugged. "Check their pockets." They did, and there it was, badges bearing the mark of Kokomi, the organization Makuro belonged to. Even the captain was stunned. "This happened right under my nose?" he muttered, disbelief in his voice. The mysterious man simply walked away. The captain and the female guard followed, bowed deeply, and thanked him. "I am Captain Twinko of the Blue Bull sect." He introduced himself. The stranger replied, "I merely did what anyone in my place would have done." Twinko asked, "How did you know they were part of Kokomi?" "I didn't," the stranger answered bluntly. "I just killed evil." And just like that, the mystery deepened. The stranger? None other than Cain von Euclid, grandson of Reinhard, the boy destined to destroy the world. Later, Cain entered a restaurant to eat. Waiting for him inside was his grandfather, proud, smiling, looking suspiciously like a man hiding multiple crimes against time and space. "You did well today," Reinhard said warmly. "You should be proud." Cain thanked him politely. Then Reinhardt's expression shifted. Dark clouds gathered in his gaze. "Tell me," he asked, "how did you know she was an accomplice?" Cain replied firmly, "I was certain. They were both evil." Reinhardt raised an eyebrow. What if she was innocent? Cain shook his head. She wasn't. The medallion from 4 years ago confirmed it. Reinhardt leaned forward. The sacred ring? Cain nodded. Did it come from the third continent? He asked. Cain hesitated. Wait. Did you steal it? Reinhardt sighed. Yes. Cain frowned. You told me never to commit evil acts. Theft is disgraceful. Reinhardt snapped. Quiet. If I hadn't stolen it, I wouldn't have been able to change your fate. Cain blinked. So, stealing relics is okay if it's for me? Reinhardt nodded solemnly. Cain squinted. What about those peaches from the Celestial Kingdom? Reinhardt looked away. And the sacred relics from the ocean depths? Cain crossed his arms. You stole those too, didn't you? Reinhardt roared. Stop talking. Then he softened. What matters now is whether the ring accepted you as its owner. Cain thought back. The 3 people I killed were surrounded by black energy. They radiated pure evil. Reinhardt smiled grimly. That means the ring has accepted you, which means your celestial killing star has fully awakened. He continued, Destiny has been cruel to you, but reaching this point and standing against it, that's no small feat. Cain still didn't quite understand his grandfather's view on fate. Even after 13 years together, some things remained a mystery. Reinhardt concluded, Don't burden yourself with thinking about it now. Knowing what I know, it would exhaust you for life. Then he chuckled. Besides, your body looks like that of a beast now. You truly are my grandson. Cain blinked. Is that a compliment? Reinhardt laughed. Interpret it however makes you feel better. After dinner, the two retired for the night. As Reinhardt lay down, he called out, Cain. Yes, grandfather? There's nothing binding us anymore. You're free to live your life. Cain nodded firmly, speaking with the kind of earnestness usually reserved for motivational speeches and cheesy anime openings. I'll always do good, he declared, and I will fight evil wherever I find it. He added that he would live freely, but not too freely. He still had limits, after all. He wasn't about to start robbing banks or adopting random cats off rooftops without purpose, he was clear. He would live within the boundaries his grandfather had spent 13 years drilling into him, through sword swings, grueling training sessions, and questionable moral lessons involving sacred relics from other continents. Reinhardt beamed at this answer, clearly relieved that all those years of intense emotional manipulation and questionable grandfatherly advice hadn't gone to waste. His grandson had the right mindset. He wasn't just strong. He was ethically strong. With that final conversation, Reinhardt finally went to sleep, fully confident in the legacy he had built and the trauma he had inflicted. Meanwhile, Cain stayed awake for a while longer, staring at the ceiling like he was trying to mentally calculate his probability of becoming an evil overlord. The next morning, Cain woke up and immediately realized something was off. His grandfather was nowhere to be found, and no breakfast, no goodbye hug, not even a sticky note saying, "Don't forget to eat, you emotionally stunted killing machine." Just silence. Eventually, he noticed an envelope on the table. He opened it and found a letter addressed to him. Reinhardt wrote, "Our journey together has ended today. It might seem sudden, but trust me when I say you've learned everything you needed to. Go forth, my grandson. Live your life. Don't let fate constrain you." He added one more thing in case Cain had any lingering doubts. "You are not evil, no matter what anyone says. You're just really intense sometimes." Cain muttered to himself, half convinced, half panicking, half trying to self-diagnose his soul. "I know I'm not evil. I know I'm not evil. I swear, I'm not evil." At the end of the letter, there was a final note. "Seek out Kyle the blacksmith in the Central Continent. He's a good guy, a bit gruff, probably smells like fire and regret, but he'll help you." As he wandered through town, Cain bumped into a group of suspicious individuals. So, naturally, Cain attacked them, guided by the medallion glowing ominously around his neck. Confirming their evil nature like a divine guilt trip, he made short work of them. Despite being outnumbered, Cain didn't break a sweat. or a nail. None of them even managed to scratch him. One poor fool screamed in rage, shaking his fist like a cartoon villain. "You monster! Do you even realize what you've done? Offending the Kokomi organization means death." However, he was quickly dealt with. Then he turned to the rest of the group, who were now visibly sweating harder than a man caught stealing cookies from a nun's bakery. They charged him, furious and determined to avenge their fallen comrades. But Cain? He was already bored. His sword broke mid-combat, which annoyed him more than anything. "These things never last," he muttered, tossing it aside like expired cereal. Then he started fighting with his bare hands. Yep, despite their desperate pleas for mercy, Cain kept going, punching faces, snapping necks, making it look disturbingly easy. At one point, a bloodied, broken-nosed survivor tried to speak. Cain looked down at him thoughtfully. "Ha! Harder to knock someone out without killing them than I thought." He turned to the unconscious man and said, "You're lucky. You were just a low-level grunt. I saw it in your aura." While scanning the area, he noticed a bright, pure light emanating from a distant castle. He recognized it instantly. It was the same light he'd seen during his travels with his grandfather. The kind of light that screamed, "Trustworthy person inside." He decided to leave the remaining survivors for that person to deal with. Less mess for him. From the top of the tower in the castle, an old man watched Cain disappear into the distance. He crossed his arms, stroking his beard like Gandalf if Gandalf wore leather armor and carried a sword instead of a staff. "When I heard about a young foreigner barely 20 years old who beheaded Kuragami Makuro in a single strike," he mused, "it piqued my curiosity. But the fact that he sensed my presence from such a great distance?" He smirked. "This is no ordinary warrior." He wondered why Cain had killed everyone yet spared one survivor deliberately, as if leaving the man's fate in someone else's hands. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice calling out behind him. "Grandmaster, what are you doing here?" A young girl ran toward him, panting from climbing the tower stairs. He answered simply, "I came here first." Before she could ask another question, he leapt off the tower and vanished like a ninja who skipped leg day. She blinked. Then she leapt after him, because obviously, together, the two reached one of the Kokomi members who had tried to escape. The old man tapped the guy on the head hard and knocked him out cold. "Got him," he announced. The girl, Shuran, asked, "Wait, is this the one we came to find?" She looked at the emblem on his cloak, eyes narrowing. "A Kokomi member." She drew her sword. "Should I kill him?" "No," the old man replied. "We'll bring him to court." Shuran frowned. "Why wait? People who choose evil shouldn't get trials." Her mentor responded calmly. "Another person got to him first, and that person wanted him to face justice." Shuran blinked. "You mean the one who wiped out the whole group?" She was impressed. "To sense your presence from that far away, even our best disciples couldn't do that. They trained for years and still couldn't even see your shadow." She added, "If I didn't know where you like to hide, I wouldn't have found you at all." The old man chuckled. "That kid may be quick-witted, but don't call him a child." Shuran raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you mean he's only a little older than me?" Caught off guard, the old man scratched his head. Yeah, about your age." Then he noticed something on the ground, a broken sword shard. He picked it up. "This must be the one he used." Shuran pointed out, "It's broken." The old man paused. He didn't use inner energy at all. Realization hit him. He beat them all using physical strength alone. Shuran's eyes widened. "So he's that strong?" The old man nodded. "He's on another level entirely." Shuran grinned. "Wow, sounds like he's amazing." In the central continent, a land built on peace between the world's many factions, a place where diplomats cry quietly in meetings, people gathered to trade goods from every corner of the world. At the central port of Shuro, a fortune teller from the second continent stood surrounded by people, promising to predict fates ranging from exam scores to romantic compatibility. Cain passed by, annoyed by the crowd. He was looking for the train station. This fortune teller was not helping. Suddenly, the fortune teller called out to him, "You look tense. Want me to read your destiny? Half price. Cain politely declined. She insisted. Everyone knows the priestess seer of the second continent can see fate itself. Come on. I can reveal something truly exciting. Before Cain could respond, a third figure joined the scene. A girl with white hair approached. Curious. Can you tell my fortune too? The fortune teller asked the girl what she wished to know. The girl replied that, although she could perceive the destinies of others, she was never able to see her own. The fortune teller inquired whether she truly wished to understand fate and destiny, and the girl confirmed that this was exactly what she sought. As this exchange took place, Cain silently observed the girl, speculating that she might be a member of the Silver Fox clan due to her large ears and fluffy tail. She noticed Cain's gaze and asked if her ears and tail looked strange to him. Cain quickly apologized, explaining that he hadn't meant to offend her. The girl approached him and said there was no need to apologize. She added that she thought he was interested in her and had been trying to start a conversation. She remarked that perhaps their meeting was fated and then asked if he would like to have his fortune read along with hers, offering to cover the cost. Cain politely declined her offer. The girl feigned disappointment and mentioned that it was her first time visiting the central continent. She admitted feeling uneasy about having her fortune read alone and noted that Cain seemed interested in his fate as well. Cain responded that he didn't need to know anything about his fate and was content as he was. The girl replied that if Cain wouldn't read his fortune, then neither would she, and she would leave. Despite the fortune teller's attempt to stop her, the girl walked away, leaving the fortune teller visibly frustrated, muttering that it hadn't been a good day. Another member of the Silver Fox clan appeared and asked whether they should step in to restore order. Tamira replied there was no need to take action, remarking that the girl had been disrespectful anyway. The second girl commented that unscrupulous individuals often exploited the fortune teller's reputation to promote their own enterprises. Tamira agreed, adding that addressing every small matter would be endless. However, she admitted she was more intrigued by the young man she had encountered earlier. At that point, Cain had arrived at the train station. Tamira continued, expressing her interest in Cain because she was unable to perceive anything about him. When asked what she meant, Tamira explained that Cain's destiny was entirely hidden from her, a complete mystery. She added that his fate was utterly flawless, without color, scent, or blemish, something she had never experienced before. This enigma made her even more eager to speak with him again. The other girl asked if they could attempt to see his fate. Tamira declined, confident that they would meet again. Surprised, the girl reminded her that she had just said she couldn't see anything regarding Cain. Tamira clarified that instead of seeing his destiny, she had seen something else, a train ticket to Bral, the capital. She commented on the strangeness of this coincidence, since she too was heading to Bral. For some reason, seeing Cain had reminded her of an old man she had met long ago, someone who also had a mysterious fate. She wondered what had become of him. The girl asked if this man could be the villain who had stolen the treasure of the first Beast King. Tamira confirmed this, but she also recalled his words from back then, that fate was something humans could shape for themselves, and that if someone couldn't define their destiny, they had to make their own choices. His words had remained with her. Because of this, when trying to see something other than Cain's fate, she had inadvertently glimpsed the train ticket and was certain they'd cross paths again. Meanwhile, Cain reflected on Tamira, a Silver Fox clan priestess who often spoke of fate. He remembered how his grandfather had mentioned a prophecy involving a girl whose destiny was tied to 3 stars. One of these stars represented a priestess from the Silver Fox clan capable of perceiving the depths of fate. According to the prophecy, this priestess was fated to pierce his heart with a spear, and she was meant to be his greatest enemy. Yet, instead of animosity, she had treated him with kindness and friendliness. Cain wondered if this shift was because his destiny had become more neutral. If that were true, then other destinies might have changed as well. Based on what his grandfather had told him, Cain was originally destined to kill 20 people, those with the most significant destinies, and if one counted the minor ones, the number would exceed 100. Therefore, he concluded that the primary purpose of his journey to Bral, the capital at the continent's center, was to change those destinies and escape the fate of being a killer. Upon arrival at the Iron Heart district, a worker greeted Kane and asked how she could assist him. Kane stated that he was looking for someone and needed her help to find them. When asked for the name, he told her he was searching for the blacksmith Kyle Dipple. The worker appeared shocked and explained that meeting Mr. Kyle required scheduling an appointment. Instead, Kane handed her a wooden box and requested that she deliver it to Mr. Kyle, stating that the contents were unknown to him, as it was his grandfather who had asked him to deliver it. He added that if Mr. Kyle refused to meet him after seeing the box, he would leave quietly and cause no disturbance. Sensing Kane's sincerity, the worker informed him that Mr. Kyle was currently on break and asked him to wait while she delivered the box to him. Shortly after, another blacksmith arrived, sighed, and remarked that Amy, the worker, was very kind. However, he mentioned that she sometimes had to deal with troublesome customers. Kane noticed that the man appeared black in his perception, which to him meant the person deserved death immediately. The blacksmith approached Kane angrily, saying that if he wanted to meet Mr. Kyle, he should use money rather than whatever pathetic method he had employed. He scoffed that someone like Kane shouldn't even dream of meeting Mr. Kyle, claiming Kane probably couldn't afford it anyway. Kane calmly replied that even if he did have the money, he had no reason to purchase the blacksmith's absurd weapons. Furious, the blacksmith snapped that Kane was just a conceited, hard-headed child. Kane retorted that he wasn't arrogant. He simply didn't see the point in buying a weapon that couldn't withstand his strength. The blacksmith asked if Kane was implying that their swords were fragile. Kane said yes, he did believe that. Enraged, the blacksmith declared that he would prove his strength and take full responsibility for whatever happened next, warning that Kane wouldn't be able to handle the consequences. Kane, unimpressed, commented that a man who behaved that way didn't deserve the title Iron Heart. He walked over to a sword and pointed out that it was of the 3rd tier, adequate for someone like him to handle. Despite its appearance, he said, the sword seemed to belong to someone who knew their place. The blacksmith, infuriated by Kane's words, yelled, asking how he dared speak like that. Kane unsheathed the sword and examined it, observing that it was a perfect replica, shiny on the outside but made of inferior materials. He concluded it was a fitting match for someone as absurd as the blacksmith. The blacksmith, stunned, asked how Kane had figured that out. Kane replied that the blacksmith's reaction had given it away, and he also knew the weapon had been deliberately placed among the others to deceive inexperienced travelers. Kane swung the sword with a powerful motion, and it shattered instantly, clear proof it wasn't a genuine weapon. The blacksmith was left speechless, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Kane asked if the blacksmith was prepared to take responsibility, but the man remained in shock, unable to process the situation. The blacksmith insisted that even though inferior materials might have been used, it should have been impossible for the sword to break with a single swing. At that moment, a voice sounded behind them, remarking that it had been a long time since he visited the shop, and it appeared something interesting was going on. The speaker turned out to be none other than the master blacksmith, Mr. Kyle himself. He addressed the assistant blacksmith and demanded an explanation. Visibly nervous, the assistant pointed at Kane, accusing him of suddenly destroying swords, and insisted that the guards be called immediately. But Mr. Kyle shouted at him to be quiet, stating he didn't want to hear anything except how such worthless swords ended up in his shop. The assistant, Din, stammered in an attempt to defend himself, but Kyle interrupted, declaring that his reaction alone revealed the truth. Kyle noted that now he understood the growing rumors about weak weapons and frequent defects at the shop, and such problems couldn't be ignored without consequences. He ordered 2 other blacksmiths to restrain Din and told him to prepare for a heavy price for tarnishing the shop's name. Din begged and pleaded for forgiveness, but Mr. Kyle stood firm, unmoved by the apologies. He called Din nothing more than scum who deserved punishment. The assistant continued defending himself, insisting that Kane had insulted Mr. Kyle by claiming the sword couldn't handle his strength, and saying he wouldn't waste money on 3rd-tier swords even if he had it. Kane thought such behavior was expected from someone so despicable. Mr. Kyle then turned to Kane and asked if what the assistant claimed was true. Kane calmly confirmed it. Kyle responded by saying he had high expectations for him. He then retrieved an object that once belonged to an old friend, tossed it to Cain and told him to take it as if nothing had happened. Cain caught the item. It was a branch from a tree, confirming it was what had been inside the wooden box. Kyle then brought out a sword and handed it to Cain as a reward, explaining that it was one of the top 3 swords currently on display. He asked Cain to accept it and leave the shop immediately. Cain remained silent, looking at the sword, which irritated Mr. Kyle. He asked whether Cain disliked the sword and pointed out that Cain had earlier claimed none of the swords in the shop were worth purchasing. Kyle questioned if Cain expected to pay gold for a sword custom-made for him. Cain finally took the sword and calmly responded that his previous comments were not personal insults. They were simply facts. He explained that the issue wasn't with the shop swords alone but with all famous weapons. They couldn't endure his strength. To prove his point, Cain swung the sword, shattering one of the shop's top 3 swords with a single swing. Mr. Kyle was stunned. Cain had used no internal energy or mana, yet the sword was destroyed. Kyle was amazed at Cain's overwhelming strength, especially for someone so young. He realized that such power placed incredible strain on any weapon, making it nearly impossible for a sword to survive. Recognizing Cain's true identity, Mr. Kyle apologized for how he had treated him, admitting he hadn't known Cain was Reinhardt's grandson. Cain accepted the apology and, in turn, expressed regret for his blunt words, acknowledging he should be more considerate. Kyle conceded that everything Cain had said was true and asked why he had come, especially since he had brought a mistletoe branch, an item of great importance. Cain was surprised, as he hadn't known the object was a branch of mistletoe. Kyle asked if Cain brought it unaware of its significance. Cain explained that his grandfather had given him the box and told him never to open it. Curious, Cain asked Mr. Kyle what made the branch important. Kyle explained that it was a sacred treasure, one of the most valuable of its kind. Cain speculated that his grandfather had stolen the branch and discussed its aura, which felt weak. Kyle explained it hadn't yet been processed. He stated that the branch was of the finest raw material and, if forged into a sword, could rival a divine weapon. He also mentioned he had told Reinhardt this 20 years ago. Cain then began to understand why his grandfather had taken the branch. Kyle said he had asked Reinhardt multiple times for permission to forge the branch into a weapon, but had always been denied. Cain interrupted and asked if Kyle could forge the weapon for him instead. Kyle was surprised by the request, but Cain continued, explaining that no metal weapon lasted with him. Even the strongest swords shattered after fewer than 10 uses. He revealed that 10 years ago, after consuming the treasure of the ocean depths, his body became incompatible with metals, whether iron, orichalcum, or mithril. They all broke upon contact. Kyle commented that such a body sounded like the mythical beast of the ocean depths, and finally understood why Reinhardt had sent him the branch. He explained that a weapon made from mistletoe wouldn't be affected by Cain's condition. Shocked but excited, Cain asked if that meant he could finally possess a weapon of his own. Kyle confirmed and asked Cain to trust him. Cain left the shop feeling that this was his grandfather's final gift to him, especially after he had lost all hope of ever wielding a weapon. As he exited, he saw the assistant, Amy, talking seriously with 2 others. They were planning to report something urgent to Mr. Kyle. Amy told them she would handle it herself and asked them to return to their duties. She was startled when Cain appeared and asked about the situation and why she looked so serious. Amy stammered in surprise and couldn't respond. Cain softened his tone and asked if it was related to Din causing more trouble. Just then, several blacksmiths approached, apologizing profusely. They admitted that due to their negligence, Din had escaped before facing punishment. They explained that they knew Din had tried to scam Cain and promised to capture him and bring him to justice. They begged Cain for forgiveness. Though Cain didn't see it as a serious matter, he realized they thought he might be one of the powerful leaders of the 4th continent, people known for their short tempers and harsh reactions. Annoyed by the misunderstanding, Cain thought to himself that if his grandfather had been in his shoes, things would have gone very differently. He told the blacksmiths to lift their heads and stop apologizing. As they raised their heads, ready to thank him, they found he had vanished. Cain had dashed off toward a location where he sensed a group of villains. He launched a furious assault, prompting their leader to place a bounty of 3 ounces of gold on his head, dead or alive. As the followers celebrated the bounty, one was caught off guard when Cain charged in and seized his sword. Cain remarked that the sword was 3rd tier but would do for now. He attacked his enemies with astounding speed, exploiting their weaknesses. However, the sword broke under the pressure of Cain's power, forcing him to move to another enemy to snatch a new weapon. At that moment, another enemy tried to strike Cain from behind with a massive axe, but Cain didn't need a weapon to win. He delivered a rapid barrage of punches that rendered the attacker completely helpless. Cain seized the new axe and, in a flash, began attacking the remaining enemies attempting to confront him. With precise and powerful strikes, he maneuvered the weapon expertly, even hurling an axe backward to pierce the skull of an enemy behind him. None of the foes dared approach until one frightened subordinate sprinted toward his leader, panicked by the grim fate that awaited them if they stayed. But the leader remained composed and tried to calm him, saying there was no need for fear since their opponent was only one man. Before he could finish his sentence, Cain appeared right in front of him and snatched his sword. Commenting that this sword was far superior to the previous ones, Cain immediately plunged it into the leader's chest, killing him instantly. Furious, the remaining subordinates charged at Cain, shouting accusations for murdering their leader. But in a single motion, Cain annihilated them all with a single slash of the sword. None could land even a scratch on him. Only 2 members remained, trembling with terror. They desperately explained that they had only obeyed orders because their families were threatened with death. Cain cut down one of them without hesitation and then pointed his sword at the other's neck. He made a single promise: answer his question honestly, and he would spare his life. The man, suspicious and scared, accused Cain of lying, certain that he would be killed regardless. Cain placed his finger on the sword and solemnly swore on it, a sacred bond among knights, that he spoke the truth. Shocked by the weight of a sword oath, the man faltered. Breaking such an oath could severely damage a knight's internal energy. Cain repeated his vow, assuring that if the man answered truthfully, he would not harm him. This finally convinced the trembling man. With a voice dark and low, eyes glowing with malice, Cain asked who had sent him. The man hesitated, fear evident, and looked away. Cain responded by stabbing him in the leg, reminding him of their agreement and threatening to kill the other survivor. Crumbling under the pain, the man confessed. It was Dai Kal who had sent them. Cain smirked, confirming his suspicions. Pressing for more information, the man revealed that the mission was connected to a powerful organization based in the capital, Bral, and that Din had leveraged his influence to involve them. Cain realized Din was just another cog in a vast criminal enterprise, which explained the sinister aura Cain had sensed from the start. Cain asked specifically where Din was operating. The man answered that one of their key bases was Lean's Rest, and the order originated there. Wanting to ensure honesty, Cain questioned him again. The man swore on all he had that this was the truth and that he knew nothing more. Cain removed the sword from his leg, acknowledging the man's sincerity and remarking that Lean's Rest was nearby. The man pleaded for release, reminding Cain of his promise. But Cain coldly declared that he would still kill him. The man was stunned and demanded how Cain could break a sword oath. Cain revealed that he had eaten the celestial peach, which purged internal energy from his body, freeing him from the constraints of traditional vows. The man protested, insisting that a knight's word was his honor. Cain agreed but added that there were exceptions. Oaths made to evil people were never truly valid. This principle was something Cain had learned through hard experience. With one swift movement, Cain beheaded him. Despite Cain believing the sword would last longer, it shattered after fewer than 10 strikes. He realized more than ever that he needed a weapon uniquely suited to him. One that would never break. At Lean's Rest, the exterior looked like any ordinary house. But inside, a secret passage led to a basement filled with the most vile criminals. Murderers, thieves, and those who proudly boasted about their sins. Among them, a kidnapped child sat quietly, appearing to come from a noble family. One of the criminals asked the kidnapper how he found the child. Meanwhile, Din Kal, former deputy manager of the blacksmith shop, raged at the failure of the men he had sent. Furious, he lamented that if he had known the masked man was coming, he wouldn't have acted so carelessly. Din asked if the masked man was ready to act. The man responded by asking where. Din clarified that he wanted him to deal with the young man who insulted him earlier that day. But the masked man noted that his only directive was to retrieve a specific item. When Din asked what item, the masked man replied that he sought information about Ironheart. This sent a chill through Din, who feared that once the masked man got what he wanted, he'd be killed. But the masked man calmly stated he had no orders to eliminate Din, so he was safe. Din handed over a data chip containing the information. The masked man took it and announced he would leave now that his objective was fulfilled. Panicking, Din pleaded for protection, but the masked man silenced him. Noting the eerie quiet outside nearby, someone instructed the kidnapped child to count to 20 before opening his eyes. But Cain, having infiltrated the hideout, gently told the child to keep his eyes closed just a bit longer. When Din and the masked man arrived, they were stunned to see Cain holding the child on his shoulder and assuring him that the next time he opened his eyes, he'd be in his mother's arms. The masked man asked Din who the boy was. Din replied that he was the disrespectful one from earlier. The masked man approached Cain, accusing him of being needlessly brutal and violent for his age. Cain replied sharply, mocking the accusation and pointing out the hypocrisy. It was laughable for people like them to speak of cruelty. Cain stated that he only killed those who bragged about slaughtering innocents and tortured those who prided themselves on causing suffering. To him, mercy was reserved for the innocent, not for evil. He believed malice must be met with equal force. Cain mockingly asked what crimes the masked man had committed and whether he should be beheaded like the rest. Realizing Cain was no ordinary opponent, but possibly insane, the masked man drew his sword that in a flash. Cain lunged. He moved so fast the masked man didn't even see the strike. Though Cain's blade shattered before it could sever the masked man's head, half of it still embedded in his neck, paralyzing him. Cain warned him not to move or suffer an agonizing death. Cain turned his attention to Din. With a voice full of madness, he told him they were the last two left. Din screamed in terror, knowing no one could save him now. After completing his mission, Cain returned to Ironheart and relayed all that had transpired to Blacksmith Kyle. Kyle confirmed that Din was just a low-ranking member of a criminal organization linked to the notorious Atlanta network. Cain agreed and presented the data chip containing the evidence Din had prepared to hand over. Kyle noted that the chip appeared to belong to an extremely old model originating from the third continent, likely designed for security-related functions. Cain pointed out that such an outdated model would make it hard to find a compatible device capable of reading the data. Frustrated, Kyle admitted he was increasingly disturbed by their inability to grasp the organization's true motives, which only deepened his unease. Cain agreed, saying that given how little they knew about the group's intentions, they had to remain cautious. Kyle then warned Cain to be careful. If anything happened to him, Kyle wouldn't be able to forge his sword. Cain replied that he didn't mean to suggest such a possibility, but Kyle laughed and said he was joking. He then asked who the child Cain had brought with him was. Cain explained that he had rescued the child from the villains at the hideout. Given Atlanta's involvement, he didn't trust the guards or volunteers and asked Kyle to watch over the child. Kyle assured him that of course he would, and there was no need for concern. Grateful, Cain thanked him and prepared to leave, but Kyle stopped him and handed him a scroll. He explained that he had found it hidden in a compartment inside the box that once held the mistletoe branch. Possibly a message from Cain's grandfather, Reinhardt. Cain thanked him again, and Kyle replied that he was simply doing his part. Cain promised to contact Kyle once he found a way to read the data chip, and Kyle said he'd be counting on him. Cain left after making arrangements, bidding Kyle farewell and hoping they'd meet again soon. Meanwhile, back at the hideout, Tamira and her companion arrived, both stunned by the destruction around them. The friend remarked that no one on the central continent possessed the kind of power needed to challenge Atlanta like this. She asked if Tamira thought the people responsible could be allies, but Tamira wasn't sure. The friend emphasized that regardless of their allegiance, these people were extremely violent, something not necessarily comforting, even if they were on the same side. Tamira agreed, saying their methods might have crossed moral boundaries. Her friend added that while she had no qualms about eliminating villains, brutality of this level was concerning. Tamira admitted she found their tactics familiar somehow. The friend noted that at least it was encouraging to know there were others opposing Atlanta. Tamira said it would be amazing if more such people arrived from other continents. Her friend agreed it was possible, given Atlanta's widespread influence. Surely others must be fighting the organization elsewhere, even independently. Tamira said she'd like to meet such fighters, and her friend added that she, too, wanted to investigate them further. Elsewhere, Kane sat in his room, reading the letter from his grandfather. It said that if he was reading it, he had made it to the central continent, met the blacksmith Kyle, acquired the mistletoe branch, and possibly requested a sword. The letter also advised him to seek out the priestess who could see fate. Kane was startled by how Reinhardt had anticipated these events. What seemed like mere coincidences now felt ominous, especially when the letter mentioned facing Atlanta's men in the capital, Brawl. Kane realized that if his grandfather was right about everything else, then it was very likely he'd die at the hands of Atlanta. The next day, Kane visited Celestial Goods, a marketplace known for rare items from the third continent, famed for its advanced mechanical tech. But he was exhausted, wishing he had more mana. Those rich in mana needed little sleep and could recover quickly. Lacking it, Kane felt sluggish. He entered a shop and asked the vendor if they had a TK device. The vendor said the TK line had been discontinued 27 years ago, but Kane hoped one might still function. It was the last shop in the area, and Kane felt this might be his only chance. Later, Tamira and her companion arrived at the same shop. Tamira asked the vendor if he had an old tablet called the TK. The vendor's eyes lit up. He asked if she meant the TKDX32, wondering if the model was becoming popular again, as someone had just purchased the last one. Frustrated, Tamira asked if all units were sold. Her friend whispered that it was unlikely an average person would travel to Helam just to find an old device. Tamira suspected the buyer might be tied to Atlanta and decided they had to track the person down. She politely asked the vendor to show her a TKDX32 and provide details about the recent buyer so she could locate them. Meanwhile, Kane inserted the chip into the tablet. A system screen appeared, revealing alarming data. A plan to seize weapons stored in Ironheart, the kidnapping of Kyle and his family, and details about Kyle, his relatives, and all Ironheart workers. Horrified, Kane knew he had to alert Kyle immediately. But before he could act, Tamira appeared, rushing up to him and saying she knew they'd meet again. Kane, connecting the moment to his grandfather's letter, wondered if she was the priestess who could see fate. Tamira asked if he remembered her, and though Kane remained silent at first, thinking this was the worst possible time, he eventually said yes and guessed the person behind her was likely her guardian. Tamira was delighted he hadn't forgotten, joking she might have burst into tears if he had. She stepped closer, saying the more she saw him, the more mysterious he became. She still couldn't see his fate. Her guardian reminded her to stay focused on the task at hand, but Tamira surprised everyone by bluntly asking Kane if he was with Atlanta. The guardian tried to stop her, calling it inappropriate, but Kane calmly said he wasn't with Atlanta. In fact, he was against them. Tamira felt relieved. She had sensed that much. Just then, a group arrived. Their leader announced he had come to see who had taken the bait. Everyone froze, recognizing him. It was Sho Bathan, Atlanta's executive director. Tamira asked how he had found them and why he was there. Her guardian moved to protect her, urging her to stay back. Sho smirked, saying it had been a long time, over a year, since their encounter on the second continent. The onlookers murmured as they processed the identity of the man before them. They immediately began fleeing the area, prompting Sho to sarcastically comment that it appeared no one here was interested in welcoming distinguished guests from the second continent. The guardian, visibly angered, ordered him not to come any closer. Sho then demanded they explain why they had come to the central continent. However, both the guardian and Tamira remained silent. Sho continued, remarking that they didn't really need to respond, since their purchase of the tablet already confirmed they were investigating something. He pointed out, however, that the specific tablet he had been tracking wasn't in the possession of either the Guardian or Tamira, but with Cain instead. This revelation clearly caught Sho off guard, and with visible frustration, he declared that the person who had bought the TKDX-32 tablet wasn't the princess at all, but just an ordinary man. Cain asked if they had been tracked through a chip planted in the device. Sho confirmed this, explaining that the chip had been embedded intentionally to lure out anyone who might pose a threat or opposition to their plans. The Guardian was stunned by the sheer audacity of such a tactic, embedding tracking devices in seemingly normal items. Sho mocked her shock, proudly saying that the strategy had worked well and led them to a very valuable catch today. He turned to Cain and questioned him about his identity, wanting to know whether he was affiliated with the others or just a random person who happened to end up with the tablet. Cain calmly replied that he was just an ordinary man. Sho laughed with mock disbelief, claiming he would pretend to believe him, and noted that Cain didn't seem strong or monstrous like others he had encountered. At that point, he signaled his men. The organization's operatives swiftly moved in, surrounding the princess and her guardian from every direction. Sho then activated massive speakers, which unleashed powerful and highly disruptive sonic waves. These sound waves were specifically engineered to have devastating effects on noble beasts like the princess. Cain was caught off guard when he heard the weapon being referred to as anti-beast, and he quickly noticed how intensely the waves were affecting both the princess and her guardian. Far more than anyone else. The scientist burst into maniacal laughter, taunting the princess by saying that she could now sleep peacefully, because once she awoke, she would find herself locked away in an underground prison. As expected, the princess lost consciousness and collapsed. The Guardian, barely hanging on, apologized to the princess before fainting as well. Cain, however, remained standing, calm and composed, watching the situation unfold without saying a single word, not even to Sho. The scientist then turned his attention to Cain, stating that it was now his turn. Despite Cain appearing ordinary, the scientist made it clear he had no intention of letting him go without scrutiny. He asked Cain to come quietly, explaining that if no incriminating evidence was found during the investigation, he would be released. Cain asked whether that meant they intended to take him to their base. Sho confirmed and instructed Cain to wear the cuffs, assuring him that he didn't plan to harm him, especially since he was in a good mood after successfully capturing the princess. Thanks to Cain, he handed Cain a pair of cuffs forged from the strongest iron in existence, renowned for its mana-suppressing capabilities and incredibly high production cost. Cain, however, responded only with a cunning smile, showing little concern, and put the cuffs on himself. After some time, they arrived at the organization's underground facility, a place defined by its bitter cold and grim atmosphere. The Guardian slowly began to regain consciousness. She awoke with a start when she realized the princess was no longer beside her and began screaming her name in a panic. Cain sat silently in the same room, showing no reaction. The Guardian noticed that the cuffs restraining her were made from flowing iron, which completely prevented her from using any form of energy. Cain asked if she had fully regained her senses and informed her that the princess had been taken away just moments earlier. Shocked by this, the Guardian immediately began screaming for the guards. But Cain calmly told her there were no guards outside. They had all been summoned elsewhere. Still confused, the Guardian asked Cain whether he was truly opposed to Atlanta, as he had previously claimed. Cain replied that he was deeply against them, especially since they were trying to take away his sword. Perplexed by the response, the Guardian questioned what he meant. Cain clarified that there was only one version of this sword in the entire world, and he had no intention of giving it up to anyone. He added that he intended to teach the organization a painful lesson. Frustrated, the Guardian snapped at him, asking whether he truly grasped the seriousness of their situation. She reminded him that both their hands and feet were bound in flowing iron cuffs, restraints so strong that even the Beast King himself couldn't break them. Cain, unshaken, calmly replied that while the cuffs were certainly sturdy, they were still made of metal, meaning they were not enough to restrain him. With ease, he broke his own cuffs as though they were made of paper, leaving the Guardian stunned. She demanded to know how he had done that, to which Cain simply told her not to move. He promised to break her cuffs just as effortlessly. True to his word, within seconds he shattered the Guardian's restraints, leaving her frozen in disbelief.